In today's gospel reading, our Lord is telling his disciples, telling all of us to stay awake, to be very alert, because we do not know on what day our Lord is coming. We don't know when Christ will return at the end of time, nor do we know when we are going to die. So it's a message of great preparedness, or a need for great preparedness. Notice at the end of today's gospel reading how our Lord refers to the hypocrites once again, and yesterday we had that in yesterday's reading, and I pointed out that the reality is that we are all hypocrites. We claim to be Christians, we want to live a good Christian life, but we all tend to fall short. And I said, well, the real key is that we acknowledge this and that we are striving to become better, even though we occasionally fall short. But other people who don't acknowledge their hypocrisy, they're really blind. They present themselves as one way, but in reality, they're very different. And so the punishment for these hypocrites is very severe. So in other words, their pride, or their level of pride, may have been such that they're deserving of hell. So notice our Lord's words again. He will cut him off and put him with the hypocrites, where there will be weeping and gnashing of teeth. So it's something very, very serious. Now, when our Lord tells us to stay awake, and he gives the analogy of an owner who goes away and he leaves his slaves behind, and they know not when the owner will return. And so the slaves, or some of them at least, they begin to kind of take advantage of the situation. The master is gone, we can do whatever we want, kind of thing. The master is delayed, and he begins to beat his fellow slaves and eats and drinks with drunkards. And the master of that slave will come on a day when he does not expect him. So our Lord is using a kind of extreme example. So most people would not beat their fellow slaves. But what he's saying is we have this tendency to just want to do our own thing, sometimes even to manipulate people to get them to agree with us or to do the things that we want them to do. And this eating and drinking with drunkards, in other words, just focusing on enjoying the things of this life and being very irresponsible in the way that we live our lives. In other words, thinking that we don't have to give an account to anyone. So this is clearly a wrong attitude. Now, as I mentioned, most of us probably wouldn't go to that extreme. But the point is that little by little, we can kind of adopt that kind of mentality, thinking that I am in charge of my life and not God. And instead of seeking the things of heaven, just seeking the pleasures of this world. Notice at the beginning, when our Lord says to keep awake, you know not when your Lord is coming. And then he goes on to say, but understand this, if the owner of the house had known in what part of the night the thief was coming, he would have stayed awake and would not have let his house be broken into. Therefore you also must be ready, for the Son of Man is coming at an unexpected hour. Well, what is he referring to? This thief coming in the middle of the night and breaking in. If you knew someone was going to break into your home, you would do everything in your power to prevent that from happening. If you know what particular night the thief was planning to break into your home, you would stay awake to make sure, even though you kind of put on extra locks or whatever, you would make sure that there's no way he's going to get in. You would be ready to call the police as soon as he arrives. But the point is, what do most of us do? We sleep in the night. We don't stay awake, and we don't know when the thief is going to come. So who is the thief? The devil. And when does he come? When we least expect it, when we are asleep. Not physically asleep, but when we are spiritually asleep. And when are we spiritually asleep? When we're not thinking about God. When we're not thinking about God as our master, as our ruler. In other words, when we kind of think, I don't need to obey God's commandments. I can do whatever I want. I don't need to be so focused on my spiritual life or my prayer life. I just want to enjoy the things of this world. Sure, I'll go to Mass on Sunday or, kind of recite my prayers rather quickly, but I kind of want the best of both worlds. So in other words, when we have this kind of attitude, we're really letting down our guard, which gives the evil spirits a greater opportunity to attack us, to break in, to try to steal our souls. And we allow that to happen by our negligence. So having a good spiritual life, a deep prayer life, is kind of an obstacle to the evil spirits. When we have a good routine of prayer, praying throughout the day, it's a constant reminder to us to be the way that God calls us to be, to try not to be hypocritical, as I mentioned, we are all inclined to be. So this is very, very important. And, spiritual authors, they talk about being recollected. So in other words, being recollected, not just when we're praying, but being recollected throughout the day. What does this recollection refer to? It's a kind of awareness, a constant awareness of the presence of God, a constant awareness of the reality of heaven and hell and our ultimate destiny, a constant awareness of the shortness of our lives. Now, we can't always be consciously thinking about these things in great detail, but a person who takes their spiritual life seriously, they come to a stage where they're always thinking about the Lord in the same way that young people who are madly in love. They can go about their work, but they're always in the back of their mind, they're always thinking of their beloved. So this is the ideal for all of us, and I'm sure that most of us are probably not there, but it's something that we need to work at. And by having, prayer spread throughout the day, so as priests or religious, we're required to pray from the breviary 5 times a day. And the ideal that it's kind of spaced out throughout the day, and sometimes we get busy, so we kind of do a whole chunk of it in the evening, or sometimes if I know I'm going to have a busy day, sometimes I'll try to do more of it in the morning. But the ideal is that it's spread out throughout the day. Same as when we say grace before meals, or the Angelus. These are all reminders to us to kind of remain focused, to draw our mind back from the distractions of this world, whatever we may have been working on, to draw our mind back to God, to remind us of these things so that we are on the right path and that we kind of are on guard or vigilant against any possible attacks. Because if we are not vigilant, then little by little we give in to pride, we give in to insisting on our own way, getting into arguments and treating people badly, and all these things that our Lord warns us about by means of kind of extreme examples such as drunkenness and beating your fellow slaves. So let us do what we can to try to be as recollected as we can be, not just during our prayer time, but throughout the day.